This is my analysis of the Paris terrorist attack. First, my condolences to the victims of the families of the victims, and also I want to do this analysis because it's obvious that the terrorists need to be punished, murderers that they are, but we have to talk about the problem of terrorism and how to deal with it. And when you're angry and fearful and nobody explains why they do these attacks, nobody gives a real explanation, you don't know what you should do. You're not thinking. So the political leaders and the journalists whose responsibility is to explain why these terrorists are attacking and what is the possible solution to the terrorism, which is really homegrown, because ISIS itself has no capacity to attack the United States or France or Russia. They don't have an army, they don't have a navy. I mean, they have an army, but they don't have an air force, so they couldn't get across the Atlantic or even to France. So really what we're talking about is a social political problem that's homegrown. In other words, people inside the country that decide to commit murder for a political objective. And that's the thing you need to understand. And since the politicians and the journalists aren't explaining it, I'm going to do it. First, you need to know what terrorism is. Terrorism is a criminal act that is performed for a political objective. Say, a hitman is a murderer for money. That's why he kills people. A terrorist has a political objective. What does the terrorist want to do? The terrorist wants to increase the cost of a public policy that he disagrees with so that that public policy will be changed. That's his objective. And that's true about all terrorists. They're different from other murderers in this way. In order to understand them, you need to understand what is their political objective. So, for example, just so we can see the whole genre, the IRA terrorists from Ireland bombed London. Why did they murder innocent Londoners? Well, because they wanted Great Britain out of Northern Ireland. So they're trying to persuade them to leave, to get out. Now, if the British government changed their policy and abandoned Northern Ireland, they would stop bombing. That they would have achieved their objective. But I'm not saying that that they should necessarily have done what the terrorists want. What the British government needed to do was examine whether it was right for them to leave, whether they should leave, whether it was in their self-interest to leave. And in this case, well, a referendum in Northern Ireland, if most people wanted to stay associated with Great Britain, then they should not leave. But if most people wanted them to get out and to terminate the association, they wanted to secede from Great Britain, then they should permit the secession. That's what is the case in all terrorist actions. You have to, the government and people that are under attack have to examine the situation based on their own self-interest. So the Basque attacked Spaniards because they want independence from Spain. They did terrorist attacks. They put bombs. Some people died. Why? They wanted to have independence. The Chechens wanted to get the Russians out of Chechnya. They wanted independence from Russia. So if a majority of the Chechens want Russia out, then they should get out. Regardless of what the terrorists want, they should do what's in their self-interest, because it's not in the Russian self-interest to subjugate a group of people, to impose their political will and their military might on a group of people. If a group of people want to secede, they should respect that desire if it's the majority of Chechnya, and leave. So, end of problem. No more terrorism. Now, what happened with the United States and Al Qaeda? Same thing. The Al Qaeda group, Bin Laden, he wanted the United States to get out of the various countries that they were in, protecting various groups like the Saudi kings, for example. That we had a base in Saudi Arabia. Why? Because he wants to overthrow Saudi Arabia. He can't do it as long as we are allied with Saudi Arabia. So, first step was get Americans out. He tried bombing embassies. We didn't pay any attention. He bombed the SS Cole. We didn't pay any attention. So he concluded that the only way he could grab the attention and impose that extra cost that I talked about on the American people, try to terrorize them, make them afraid and willing to change the policy, was to bomb, to land those airplanes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and commit a terrorist attack. And then he thought, mistakenly, that we would get out of the Mideast, that we would take out our bases, and we would see the light. So he could do what he wanted. What did Al Qaeda want? They want to have a theocracy based on Sharia law. They don't want a monarchy in Saudi Arabia. He was a Saudi. So what did they do? First step, get rid of the Americans, they thought, and after that they could overthrow the monarchy, which are tyrants. So these are just groups in the Middle East that are fighting either for religious reasons, like the Shiites and the Sunnis, or secular groups like Saddam Hussein's. So Saddam, we committed the same mistake with Saddam. We went to the Iraq War. Why? American people were angry. We wanted to hit back. And so we overthrew Saddam Hussein. Who was the secular government that murdered and kept in check those radical Muslim Islamists that everybody's talking about now? And now Iraq, as a result of our invasion, has become a Shiite government. The Sunnis, which are these ISIS people, they were out of power. They created their own little army, and finally they created ISIS, and they started to get territory in Iraq and in Syria to continue their war against the Shiites. Now, why do we have to be involved in that? There's no good reason. Let them continue their century-old wars. Let the secular governments and the monarchs fight over power. These people are primitive, medieval, religious zealots, and they need to learn on their own the result of their stupidity. As long as they don't attack us, no problem. Whoever wins the war over there, they always want to sell the oil to somebody because they need to eat. That's why they sell the oil. They need the conveniences. And they would stop all the terrorist attacks because we have nothing to do with it. For example, they don't attack Argentina. It has nothing to do with it. Doesn't get involved in their wars. They don't attack North Korea. North Korea doesn't get involved in their wars. They don't attack any country, but they do attack. Why did they attack France? Well, France got involved. And so they think, instead of doing the right thing, which is persuading people of the right public policy, like I'm trying to do now, they are murderous thugs, and they deserve to be caught and punished, but that has nothing to do with what our policy should be. Our policy should be based on our own self-interest. And the real problem that we have, which is homegrown terrorists, ISIS cannot come over and attack us. They're in the middle of a war. They are definitely JV. They can't even beat the Iraqi government, which is a disorganized group of people who after 10 years of training and military help from the United States, can't even beat the ISIS people in battle. And they run and abandon their armaments. Which armaments? The ones we provided. There wouldn't be any ISIS if we had not decapitated Saddam. So now you have a motivated radical Islamic group, ISIS, kicking ass with very little resources, but they are JV. They cannot attack Turkey, even a middle-range military power. And Israel could wipe them off the face of the map easily. The United States could destroy 5 ISISes if they wanted to. But what's the point? It's not our business. It's not our fight. This was pointed out by Bill Maher, of all people. If we get out, end of terrorism, because they're homegrown terrorists, which is the real threat for the United States, and as the Parisians saw for Paris and France, is people that are one side or the other of these wars that are going on in the Middle East for centuries, that want to try to persuade their country, the one they live in, not to be involved on X side or the other side. That's the real threat that we have. So if you analyze the situation and you understand what the terrorists want, then you have to see, is it in our self-interest to do what the terrorists want? Or is it against our self-interest? By the way, terrorism is a losing strategy no matter what. First of all, as you've noticed, instead of persuading France to abandon their intervention in the Mideast, they persuaded them to do exactly the opposite, bomb them. And that's what they're doing. So they're getting more involved, just like with the United States. And so that's a losing strategy in that sense. If in a particular country, the terrorist strategy, in other words, instead of persuading your fellow citizens of the right policy, you decide to murder X group or X people in order to try to get them to change the public policy, and by some strange chance the terrorist strategy worked, you would have ruined your country, because now the lesson that the people learned in that country is, if you want to change public policy, use terrorism. And once that's ingrained in a society, nobody can live well. That's it. That's the end of good life. That's the end of peace and prosperity. It's gone. So this is a misguided, stupid strategy by primitive, irrational religious zealots. And the irony is they can never win. But that's their problem, not our problem. They can be as stupid as they want over there, kill whoever they want over there. It's not our problem here, like Bill Maher said, or like Trump said. What we need to do is to get calm, think things through, and understand the motivation of the terrorists, and figure independently whether if it's in our self-interest to be involved or not. The thing we did not do in the war in Iraq, and that's why we went to the war in Iraq, because we were in a frenzy, we were angry, and we wanted to hit back, and we didn't stop to think that if we deposed Saddam, the Shiite, that just helped Iran and the Shiites, and now the Iraqi government and Iran are allied. Previously they were at odds, and there was a balance of power between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and they had their little wars occasionally, and that's not our problem. So, what should we really do? We should examine the principle that we should use to decide whether to be involved in another war or not. Should we use deterrence and military strategy or preemption? Deterrence is when you don't attack people that have not attacked you, Preemption is you attack people that have not attacked you because maybe in the future, sometime, like according to Alan West, next century, they will attack us. Should you use the principle of self-defense? That means if you're attacked or an imminent threat of attack, or are there other good reasons to go to war? Humanitarian reasons, protecting the so-called national interests, that doesn't really mean anything, so you can go anytime you want. Is that a proper principle? Or the ones that the Democrat use in the debate, go to war only in the last resort. That's not a principle. That doesn't tell you when you're going to go and when you're not going to go. Should we follow the wisdom of our founding fathers who said we should have a non-interventionist policy and not get involved in foreign wars? Or should we go over there and try to be the unpaid world policeman and fight all the monsters that pop up everywhere? That's what we have to decide. But we have to decide that independent of what the terrorists want, based on our own self-interest. What is the right policy to follow? I've done a lot of interviews on this subject, so if you want to watch them, I hope you do. Should we follow the Constitution, or should we have a lawless government? The Constitution is clear. It says military action is for the purpose of the common defense of the states. If you're not attacked, you're not defending yourself. If you are getting involved, as our government is, in foreign wars where we have not been attacked, we are not acting in the common defense of the states. And the government is performing a lawless action which destroys our country. Governmental lawlessness is a disaster and is even worse than individual lawlessness. So I recommend taking a look at those interviews that I did. Even neocons like John Bolton admit that ISIS is not an existential threat, like Obama said today, which is right. They cannot harm us. It's the homegrown terrorists that can harm us, and they only care about our public policy if we get involved. So luckily for us, what the terrorists want us to do, is in our own self-interest. They want us not to be involved in those wars. And guess what? We shouldn't be involved. That's my opinion. Give me your comments and let me know what you think. Bye.